right, so our favorite person in the world, Elon Musk, recently had a conference or whatever to promote Tesla's new robo taxi. And in the course of this conference, he used imagery that looked really close to Blade Runner 2049. And I'm going to say really close because it's basically it, but it was AI generated. And the problem is that first he asked Warner Brothers if he could use this clip from Blade Runner 2049, and they said no. And then he goes ahead and AI creates it and uses that anyway. So
it's like ScarJo all over again, right?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
It's like the OpenAI ScarJo thing all over again.
Right. So exactly. So the Scarlett Johansson thing where they asked her and then she said no. And then they're like, okay, but we can generate your voice, basically anyway. And we really like your voice. So we're just going to use it. So my first question is, why do they keep, if they're just going to AI generate it, why do they keep asking for permission first? Because it kind of puts it on their radar of like, oh, you wanted to use this. And then when the actual thing comes out, they're like, oh no, you totally still used this. Like with the Scarlett Johansson thing and with this, like, why are they asking for permission?
It makes deniability a non-defense, doesn't it? They can't use it. They can't use deniability. Whereas if they hadn't said anything, they could have just denied that it's like, oh, of course. How do you have the copyright on like a guy standing against a post-apocalyptic orange background, right? Like how could they say that? But the fact that they'd asked them and then gone ahead and created that makes it such a slam dunk that it's obvious that's what they're trying to use it for.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think in their mind, they were like, we're going to be the better person. Before stealing it, we're going to ask.
But then we're going to steal it anyway. They're going to say, no, we're going to
steal it anyway, like we planned, but at least we gave them the heads up. And I think that's in their crazy mind how their defense in court is like, well, we gave them the heads up. They could have said yes, but no.
And I think that you're talking about the court version, and I think that's what their defense is going to be. Like, they asked for permission to use the actual footage, but since they didn't get permission, they AI generated similar footage that's not quite the same. So there's my second question: is a similar thing close enough? Like, is this the great value version of the clip? Or
this is going to get played out, right? This has to get I don't think there's any particular law for this yet, right?
Right.
Because they're going to claim this new ground that like, hey, it's AI, therefore no other previous kind of law can stand because it's not copyright, because it's not the original thing, or it's not a likeness because an AI did it. The first one to kind of prove this out, it's either going to open the floodgates and everything's going to be a thing and you can do whatever you want with anything anymore, or it's going to really kind of like hold, I think, the producers of AI accountable for this kind of like reproduction of things.
I don't know if you saw Wall Street Journal sue Perplexity this week over news articles.
They did, yeah.
I was saying that their searches, and so we'll see. I think all of this has come to the head, like we said in the very beginning. Like, you got to like respect copyright in this stuff. I don't understand why, as enhanced as Tesla and those guys are, the guy shows you the image, like, oh, that's cool. It looks like Blade Runner. Change the background to blue.
Right.
That's what I would have said. Just change it to blue,
but he didn't.
Make it a girl, and then we're done. You know, like, and then you're done.
I think here's with the explicit instructions: make them look just like Blade Runner 2049, and I don't care. They're going to look like Blade Runner 2049 because if there's a penalty for it, I'm the richest man on the planet. I'll just pay it.
But I hope what happens is that, and I don't care if people come for me with pitchforks, but I think, as much as I hate the corporations, I think the movie industry and the music industry should stand up for copyright and kind of put their foot down, because I'm still in the middle, to be honest, and I could go either way with enough common sense that people add, because I heard both stories. But at the same time, if it's a movie like Blade Runner that costs millions of dollars and you could just do a prompt and get its likeness that's close enough. I played with AI systems in the past, even like one where I was like, I'm going to fine tune this model to generate my face. If I don't put my face into the system as data, it will never generate me. So the only way that it's able to generate my face is that it had training data that's based on my face. By same logic, if the only way it could create a scene from, Blade Runner is because it had it as training data, which then says, is that right?
Right.
And I think what they're going to need to define in the courts is how much does a thing need to change until it's not copyright anymore. And like, because I think before you can't use the exact thing, right? But can you, like Bobby was saying, just change it to background blue and we're good? That's changing like almost 50% of the image, but it's really not, because it's just changing one color. Like,
There's
how much
also the
does it
thing
need to
here
change?
that they legally have to kind of protect their IP and their copyright, right?
Mhm.
That's always been a thing. That's historically been a thing. If a company bought out a cola that used a blue and red can, Pepsi legally had to sue them to protect that. Otherwise, if they didn't, then it became open, free for everybody to do it if they didn't sue them. So they've legally had to do that. So I think in this case, it should just be the same thing. The difference here is, instead of some person in like bringing out the cola with the blue and red can, the AI said, "Hey, why don't you bring out a cola with a blue and red can?" And then people are just claiming like, "Well, I didn't say it. The AI did it." So who's
But let's
responsible?
be fair, though. They are suing it because it is Elon that did it.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think no. Here's what I think. Elon is the only person that would do this, and OpenAI are the only people that would do this. We're not hearing about these other suits from other smaller people. I think he's,
Well,
like I said
OpenAI
before.
That's
what he
I
said.
say
He
it.
said
That's what I'm saying.
OpenAI,
OpenAI
yeah.
and Elon, the two,
Right.
Sam Altman and Elon Musk, who think they're literal gods at this point. They both think they can do anything and get away with it. I guarantee it. It's the people.
Well, I think Apple would have made their own image. That's the difference between the two on the design element. They would make it their own thing. They would have made their own dystopian universe or whatever. It would all have been
Right.
chrome and silver. Like it would have screamed Apple. That's what I'm saying. They should have just made it red or something like that. That's like,
But
Tesla,
you know
whatever
this
it is.
guy. You know how this conversation went. He literally told the designer, "I want Blade Runner 2049." And the guy's like, of course he has to do it. Because if he doesn't, he's an egomaniac and we'll
fired.
fire him.
Yeah.
it's true. Ultimately, if that's what he wants, that's what you make. But it seems like the marketing department would have said, let's swap the
They
guy
probably
character
did.
for a girl character.
Yeah.
Let's change the aesthetic from a different palette that doesn't scream Blade Runner 2049, because that is a very distinctive color palette. Like
Yeah.
That's why I said change it to blue, because when you look at all the frames from Blade Runner, you can immediately say, "Oh, that looks like Blade Runner." Like that's
Yeah.
the neon, city and rain. I mean, it's been copied so many times; it's iconic at this point. So
Yeah. And I think for all of this, I think so new, all these different cases coming up that we haven't quite figured out what and how to deal with this. Because I still think, like in music, for instance, if I create something, if it's transformative enough, even though it's based on something else I heard, it's okay. But if it's not transformative enough, so it's like this sliding scale of like where or how much transformation you have done. The issue I have with AI is that it's not a human that is transforming it. It's a machine, and it's using data based on, sources based on copyrighted material. And so I think they need to figure out like the balance. But at the same time, I've seen AI being used in a very transformative way, where again, they using Midjourney and something like, I think it's Railway, the video app that allows them to create these new pieces where they will reimagine, let's say, a movie like Superman and like the style of the 1950s. And it's like,
I've seen all of
they're
those.
kind of making like they're copying Superman or whatever, or
Star Wars,
but it's a cool, interesting spin. And so how much creative freedom do you give people to allow them to create content like that, but it's not, going against the trademark? And I think it's a balancing act. But but I think like people need to figure out what that is, because
I wonder what the damage here is. Like sometimes when you sue someone, you got to have a damage. What is the damage
Right.
of the picture here?
Well, they said that they've said that the Tesla brand is now tied to Blade Runner, associated with Blade Runner. So if you're the person on the other side of that, I would be kind of annoyed as a non-Tesla fan, a hater of Elon Musk. I'd be like, now my brand's tainted by this guy who's over here doing weird stuff.
or
money
he
you
did
put on
catch
that,
a rocket though. You got to give him some props on that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, some engineers did.
if you're a director though, hold on, that's true
Just
too.
funded it.
If I was a director and that happened to me, I would have been like, I'm making Blade Runner 3 next, and I would
That's
come
not
up with
happening.
some creative story and walk back everything, like, you know, in the movie, just and then be like, oh, it wasn't you, Elon Musk, in our movie. It's a person like you that was AI generated. So
Yeah, I'm sure he'd like
you
that.
can't sue us based on the previous lawsuit that you
It's
made
not
against
you.
us.
Yeah.
So or
It's
whatever.
Elon Musk.
Yeah, me.
Yeah.
So here's my last question about this to you guys is first, is I just lost it for a second, but because there is no legal precedent, who do you think is going to win this case?
I think the damage will. I think they'll win on base of copyright, but the damage will be like $1.
Sure.
Because I don't see. It's not like they made a movie or anyone's going to confuse this with Blade Runner 2049 and Harrison Ford,
Right.
Ryan Gosling. But like, it was a singular image, I think, or was it a movie, or what did they? They made a
It was
singular
a clip.
image, right?
No, like it was a small clip. Like
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know what the damages is. I don't know if there really is any other than if you. I don't know how you can prove them. Put it that way.
Right.
That's
yeah.
it.
What
How do you put a monetary value on it? I have no
Yeah.
idea. But I agree with you. I think they'll win. I think Scarlett Johansson will also win against OpenAI. I think it's the same. I think whichever one wins first, they end up settling.
That one's
Right,
easy
right.
because they could have hired her to do that.
no, they
Right.
tried to
Yeah.
hire her to do
They tried
that.
to, and I think it's the same case
She
here.
said
Yeah,
no.
I think it's the same thing. They say no, they do it anyway. It's
Right.
almost. It feels like the same thing to me. So I think whichever one goes ahead first, the other one ends up just being like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to use this.
Well, I guess the difference is like in this one, they wanted to use a clip from a pre-made movie, whereas Scarlett, they needed an original work from her, and they just copied her original work that they normally would have paid her to do. And I think that's why she'll win to like $30 to $50 million.
Yeah.
Here, I don't think there's any damage to Gosling or Harrison Ford or
I don't know. Harrison Ford doesn't want to be
Warner
associated with
Brothers.
Elon Musk.
Do you think this is the second part of this question? Do you think if they hadn't asked first, if the case would be closer?
Yeah, because they would just have deniability,
Right.
and that's because that's what they
I haven't
would've
seen Blade
had
Runner.
to
I don't
do.
know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know.
Blade
Like
Runner,
what?
really?
Again, what makes you think you can have a copyright on a guy standing in front of a post-apocalyptic city that's orange colored? Like, if you hadn't asked, then
Right.
you'd have been like, that would have been your excuse, and I'm sure they would have used that excuse. But now they can't
they
use that
cannot.
excuse. So
So if you're trying to steal somebody's work, just don't ask first. That's the moral of this
that's
story.
the best way of going about it.
I don't think you mess with movie studios. They kind of come after you.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like,
But
For
that's the
sure.
thing I'm wondering, is this going to set the precedence where the movie studio is going to be like, we get a taste of what's coming. Let's
That's-
prepare and
Yeah.
start putting things in motion where we could go after.
Napster doesn't
copywriting.
exist, man.
What's
Right.
insane to me, not the movie industry, but a company that's been suing everybody for the tiniest infringement on anything is Nintendo. They
Oh.
basically, if you have an emulator that you created or what have you, they just shut everything down. And not saying that everybody should be like Nintendo, but I think when it comes to copyrighted material generated by AI systems, I think there should be some sort of standard and some sort of rule, because right now nobody knows how far can you go, like in terms of pushing it to a point until it's like, obviously this is Blade Runner, or it's just like, where's the line basically? Because I've seen a lot of AI generate stuff. I could tell you where the training data came from.
well, they're going to have to make deals, just like publishers are, right? Just like New York Times, whatever it is, and these companies that are trying to make deals with OpenAI and there's other people. It all comes down to, can I make a deal for training data because you've sucked up all of my movies, right? The training data is part of the movies are part of that. Like, what cut do I get of that? And when you like exponentially like think about that, the amount of training, the data that goes in there, are they going to pay everybody? No, they can't afford to pay everybody.
Yeah.
It's cost too much money, so they don't want to pay anybody.
But do you think the big companies, for instance, OpenAI may be allegedly be like, oh man, like these movie, I don't know any movie companies, whatever, just insert name of one.
Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers. It's like they're a big player. They could give us a lot of trouble. So we'll make a deal with them where we say, oh, sure, here's your kickback. But all the little companies who can't fight those battles is like, oh, I don't know what to tell you.
That's exactly what's happening right now on the content side of things, on written content, right? Yep. They're dealing with the New York Times and Forbes and all these other ones, but Joe Schmo's blog who got eaten up, he's got he's not even going to talk to him.
Here's the scary version of this for the AI companies is we're now figuring out that LLMs aren't that hard to create, especially if you're Wall Street Journal. And so I think they're going to opt out of all of this stuff and say, you can't be in there, period, because I'm going to use my own LLM. If you want to search Wall Street Journal, I'm going to put it in there and then expose an API to it. I think that's what all of these data people will do. I think the people that license their content initially up and out are going to regret that eventually, because they could have just kept charge of it and then licensed it out through an API call, and then charge per query every time OpenAI wanted to come and look at it. They could charge for it. I think that's ultimately because it's easy to do. It's not as magical to do as it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we thought, wow, this is magic. And now you got Llama and you're like, so is it really that hard to do? Could I just train it myself? You really can.
The crazy part for me is that the damage has been done because your LLMs are only as good as your data. And if they already sucked up all the data, unless you have some sort of data that you kept
like news sources, like for news, Wall Street Journal, and those kind of publications, that's constantly news. The only thing that matters is usually the newer stuff, and that's the more weight on it. And I think eventually that's where ultimately they can win against OpenAI and say, don't suck up our stuff. I think Perplexity could get hit pretty hard by this.